Do you also reheat last night's leftovers and eat them the next day without thinking twice? If so, this video is extremely important for you because reheating certain foods can actually cause serious harm. Doctors and nutrition experts say that not every food is safe to reheat, especially when it comes to cancer risk and long-term health problems. Today, we will show you 4 specific foods that can become dangerous when they are reheated. This is not just something people say online. Food safety science and nutrition research both support this warning. Every food reacts differently to heat because of its own unique chemical structure. The first item on this list is rice, a staple food eaten almost everywhere in the world. Rice often contains bacteria spores called Bacillus cereus that can survive even the original cooking temperature. When cooked rice is left at room temperature for too long, these spores become active again and start multiplying rapidly. These bacteria produce a toxin that heat cannot destroy, so reheating the rice will not remove this danger. If you want to save rice for later, cool it down quickly and place it in the fridge right after cooking. Never leave rice sitting out at room temperature for more than 2 hours, since bacteria grow fastest during that window. The second food that experts warn against reheating repeatedly is spinach and other leafy green vegetables. Spinach naturally contains high levels of nitrates, which are perfectly fine for the body when eaten fresh. However, when spinach is reheated or left sitting for a long time, those nitrates start converting into nitrites. These nitrites can then form nitrosamines inside the body, compounds that scientists consider potentially linked to cancer. This is exactly why reheated spinach is often not recommended for young children either. It is much better to cook spinach fresh and eat it right away, avoiding any leftover portions being reheated later. The third commonly reheated food is chicken, which many households eat almost every single day. Chicken is a protein-rich food, and protein structures change quickly when exposed to heat repeatedly. When chicken is cooled down slowly after the first cooking, the risk of bacterial growth increases significantly. If chicken is not reheated thoroughly all the way through, bacteria hiding inside can survive and cause illness. Repeatedly, heating and cooling chicken also damages the quality of its protein and reduces its overall nutritional value. Experts recommend reheating chicken only once, making sure it is heated evenly and thoroughly all the way to the center. The fourth and final food on this list is potatoes, a vegetable found in almost every kitchen. If cooked potatoes are wrapped in foil and left at room temperature for too long, they can become genuinely dangerous. Wrapping potatoes in foil reduces oxygen exposure, creating an ideal environment for bacteria called Clostridium botulinum to grow. This bacteria produces an extremely dangerous toxin that reheating cannot reliably neutralize once it has already formed. If you want to save potatoes for later, remove the foil and store them in an open container inside the fridge. Never leave cooked potatoes sitting out overnight at room temperature, whether they are wrapped in foil or not. These 4 foods are simply examples, but the same basic principle applies to any food rich in protein or nitrates. Whenever food sits at room temperature for too long, reheating it afterward is often not enough to make it safe. Cancer research shows that repeated exposure to compounds like nitrosamines can gradually damage cells over many years. This is exactly why doctors consistently recommend prioritizing fresh food over reheated leftovers whenever possible. That said, this does not mean you can never reheat food again. It simply means the method matters a great deal. The first rule is to cool food quickly and refrigerate it, rather than leaving it out for hours at a time. When reheating food, the center of the dish needs to reach a proper temperature, not just the outer surface. If you are using a microwave, stir the food halfway through so the heat distributes evenly throughout the dish. Every food item should ideally only be reheated once, since repeated heating and cooling cycles encourage bacterial growth. If food smells strange or its color has visibly changed, do not eat it no matter how fresh it may otherwise look. Some people assume microwaves themselves are the dangerous part, but in reality the method matters far more than the appliance. Whether you use a stove or a microwave, the risk remains the same if the food never reaches a safe internal temperature. Eggs are another food that require caution when reheating, since protein changes can create an environment where bacteria thrive. Seafood also needs extra care when reheated because it spoils quickly compared to most other common foods. Cooking oil that gets reused repeatedly is not considered healthy either, especially when it is heated again and again for frying. Oil that has been overheated multiple times forms harmful compounds that can negatively affect the body over the long term. If cooking oil turns noticeably darker in color or develops an unusual smell, it should be replaced immediately without hesitation. Continuing to use such oil not only ruins the taste of food, but can also pose real health risks. Some people believe microwaving destroys most of a food's nutritional value, but this is actually a common misconception. In reality, nutrients are lost mainly through repeated heating and cooling cycles, regardless of which method is used to reheat the food. Another important point is to always check the internal temperature of reheated food, rather than simply guessing based on appearance. Using a food thermometer is a reliable way to confirm whether food has been heated thoroughly all the way through. Extra care should be taken when feeding children, since their bodies are not as resilient as fully grown adults. If children are repeatedly given improperly reheated food, the effects on their health can potentially last for many years. The same principle applies to elderly individuals, since the body's ability to fight bacteria naturally declines with age. This is why older family members should always be given freshly cooked meals whenever possible, with leftovers kept to a minimum. Doctors also recommend setting aside at least one day a week to cook and eat only freshly prepared meals. This not only benefits overall health, but also helps create better long-term habits around food and eating patterns. Cancer prevention is not limited to diet alone, since sleep quality, regular exercise, and stress management all play significant roles too. But because we eat food every single day, small, consistent changes in this area can lead to major long-term benefits. A balanced diet that includes fresh fruits, vegetables, and quality protein sources is always considered the better overall choice. Alongside this, storing and reheating food properly is just as important as cooking a healthy meal in the first place. If you can introduce these small changes into your household routine, you can meaningfully improve your entire family's long-term health. These changes are not difficult to make. They simply require a bit of attention and a shift in daily habits. In the end, a genuinely healthy lifestyle depends far more on small daily choices than on occasional major decisions. How food is cooked, how it is stored, and how it is reheated all combine to shape our long-term well-being. Many people assume that if food looks perfectly fine, it must still be safe to eat without any concern at all. Bacteria and their toxins often show no visible signs at all, which is why judging safety purely by appearance can be genuinely misleading. There's another important point about rice, which is that once it has been left out too long, reheating it is simply not enough to fix the problem. In situations like this, it is far safer to throw the rice away entirely, no matter how fresh it still appears to be. Besides spinach, other leafy greens, such as certain sog varieties and beetroot, also contain fairly high levels of natural nitrates. These vegetables should also be reheated sparingly, since the same nitrite and nitrosamine conversion process can occur with repeated heating. Eggs deserve a specific mention too, since many people casually eat a boiled egg the next day without giving it a second thought. If an egg has been properly refrigerated, it usually does not need to be reheated at all, and eating it cold is often the safer option. Seafood such as fish and shrimp spoils extremely quickly, and reheating seafood is generally considered one of the riskiest things you can do in the kitchen. If seafood is not eaten within roughly 2 hours of cooking, it should be refrigerated immediately, since bacteria multiply very rapidly in this type of food. The issue of cooking oil deserves just as much attention as the food itself, since many households reuse the same oil for frying repeatedly. Each time oil is reheated, it forms new compounds that can gradually become harmful to the human body over time. If oil in your kitchen has turned noticeably darker or begins to smell unusual, it should be discarded and replaced right away. Continuing to reuse such oil does not just ruin the flavor of your cooking. It can genuinely put your long-term health at risk. Some people worry that microwaves specifically destroy the nutrients in food, but this belief is largely a widespread misunderstanding. In truth, nutrient loss mainly happens because of repeated heating and cooling cycles, regardless of whether a microwave or a stove is used. It is also worth remembering that reheated food should always be checked for proper internal temperature, rather than simply relying on a rough guess. A simple food thermometer can confirm whether a dish has actually been heated evenly all the way through to its center. Special attention should always be given to children's meals, since their developing bodies are far less resilient than those of fully grown adults. If children are regularly given improperly reheated meals, the long-term effects on their health can potentially follow them for years. The exact same caution applies to elderly family members, since the body's natural ability to resist bacteria weakens noticeably with age. This is why older relatives should always be offered freshly cooked meals whenever it is realistically possible to do so. Many doctors also suggest setting aside at least one day each week dedicated purely to cooking and eating fresh meals only. Doing this does not just support better physical health, it also helps build stronger, more mindful habits around food over time. It is important to remember that cancer prevention is never about food alone, since sleep, physical activity, and stress levels all matter significantly as well. But because eating happens every single day without exception, even small, consistent changes here can add up to real long-term benefits. A genuinely balanced diet built around fresh fruits, vegetables, and quality protein sources remains the smarter overall choice for long-term health. Alongside eating well, learning to store and reheat food correctly matters just as much as the quality of the cooking itself. If your household can adopt even a few of these small changes, the overall health of your entire family can improve meaningfully over time. None of these adjustments are especially difficult, they simply require a little extra attention and a shift in everyday habits. Ultimately, a truly healthy life depends far more on small daily decisions than on occasional dramatic ones made only once in a while. The way food is cooked, stored, and reheated each day quietly shapes our long-term well-being far more than most people realize. Cooling food correctly before storing it is another step people often overlook completely, even though it makes a real difference. Leaving hot food inside a closed fridge without letting it cool first can actually raise the internal temperature of everything nearby. It is usually best to divide large batches of cooked food into smaller portions before placing them in the refrigerator. This allows the food to cool down faster and more evenly, which significantly reduces the window where bacteria are able to multiply. Labeling leftovers with the date they were originally cooked is a simple habit that many households never actually bother to follow. Without a clear date, it becomes very easy to lose track of how long something has actually been sitting inside the fridge. As a general rule, most cooked leftovers should ideally be eaten within 3 to 4 days at the very most. Beyond that window, the risk of bacterial growth increases substantially, even if the food has been stored correctly the entire time. Freezing is often a better long-term option for food you do not plan to eat again within just a few days. However, frozen food should always be thawed safely in the refrigerator rather than being left out on the kitchen counter. Thawing food at room temperature allows the outer layers to reach unsafe temperatures long before the center has even begun to defrost. This creates exactly the kind of environment where harmful bacteria are able to grow and multiply rapidly. Soups and stews are generally considered safer to reheat compared to some other foods, mainly because of their high liquid content. Even so, they should still be brought to a full boil when reheated, rather than simply being warmed halfway through. Pasta and other starchy leftovers should also be cooled quickly after cooking, since starches can create favorable conditions for bacterial growth over time. Reheating pasta thoroughly until it is steaming hot all the way through remains the safest approach for this type of food. It is also worth mentioning that reheating food multiple times throughout a single day should generally be avoided whenever it is realistically possible. Each additional cycle of heating and cooling increases the opportunity for bacteria to establish themselves within the food. Kitchen hygiene plays a supporting role in all of this as well, since dirty utensils or surfaces can reintroduce bacteria into otherwise safe food. Washing hands, cutting boards, and containers thoroughly before handling leftovers helps reduce this additional and often overlooked risk. Or, none of this information is meant to create unnecessary fear around eating leftovers, since leftovers remain a normal and practical part of daily life. The goal is simply to build awareness so that everyday habits can gradually become safer and more health conscious over time. Small, consistent changes in how we store, cool, and reheat our food can genuinely add up to meaningful long-term health benefits. Awareness paired with a few practical habits is often far more powerful than any single dramatic dietary change could ever be. Once again, remember that rice, spinach, chicken, and potatoes are the 4 foods that require special caution when reheating. By following these simple guidelines, you can meaningfully protect the long-term health of yourself and your entire family.